You've been lied to about what makes a man mentally strong. Every morning you wake up and there's this weight, this silent pressure that you can't name, can't touch, can't fight. You feel it when she looks right through you like you're invisible. You feel it when other men speak over you in meetings, dismiss your ideas, treat you like you don't matter. You feel it when you make the same promises to yourself about discipline, about change, about becoming the man you know you're capable of being, only to break them again by sunset. Here's what nobody told you. You're not weak because you lack willpower. You're not failing because you're not trying harder. You're struggling because there's an invisible assassin targeting your mind every single day, and you don't even know it exists. This assassin doesn't use bullets or blades. It uses something far more dangerous, something that lives inside your own biology, your own desires, your own unconscious drives. And the most terrifying part, you've been conditioned to think this assassin is your friend. I'm talking about the very thing that every marketing campaign, every movie, every song tells you to embrace. The thing that society says makes you a man. The thing that, according to one of history's most penetrating philosophical minds, is actually the primary destroyer of masculine mental strength. Arthur Schopenhauer spent decades studying human nature, and what he discovered will shatter everything you think you know about power, control, and what it truly means to be mentally unbreakable. He identified 8 insights that expose exactly how your own mind has been weaponized against you. And if you can understand these warnings, if you can see what he saw, you'll never be the same man again. The question is, are you ready to see the truth that most men spend their entire lives running from? Let me paint you a picture of your life right now. You wake up, and within minutes, you're already defeated. Not by external circumstances, but by internal chaos you can't control. Your phone buzzes with notifications that pull your attention in 12 different directions. Your mind races between fantasies, fears, and endless mental chatter that drowns out any possibility of clear thinking. You go to work and you feel this underlying anxiety, this sense that you're not enough, that you're falling behind, that other men somehow have access to a source of confidence and authority that you can't tap into. You bite your tongue when you should speak up. You agree when you should disagree. You compromise your values for temporary peace. And each time you do it, something inside you dies a little. You come home, and instead of facing the man in the mirror, you escape. Scroll through endless feeds of other people's highlight reel. Watch content that promises to teach you everything except how to master the one thing that matters most, your own mind. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, you'll be disciplined tomorrow, you'll become the man you're capable of being tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes because you're fighting a war you don't understand against an enemy you can't see. Here's the promise I'm making you. In the next 35 minutes, you're going to understand exactly what's been sabotaging your mental strength. You're going to see how a German philosopher who died over 150 years ago identified the precise mechanism that's been controlling your thoughts, your decisions, and your entire identity without your knowledge. More importantly, you're going to walk away with 8 specific warnings that will serve as your mental armor. These aren't feel-good platitudes or surface-level motivational content. These are surgical insights into the nature of human psychology that will give you the ability to see through the illusions that keep most men trapped in cycles of weakness and mediocrity. This isn't about becoming perfect. This isn't about suppressing your humanity. This is about understanding the difference between being driven by unconscious forces and making conscious choices. This is about reclaiming your mind so you can finally become the architect of your own life instead of its victim. The man who truly understands these 8 warnings becomes mentally untouchable. Not because he doesn't feel pain, but because pain can no longer manipulate. Not because he doesn't have desires, but because desires can no longer enslave. Not because he doesn't face challenges, but because challenges can no longer break. Are you ready to become that man? Pillar 1, the modern mental slavery. Schopenhauer called it the will to live, this blind, unconscious force that drives all human behavior. But let me translate this into terms that will hit you where you live. You are being controlled by drives you don't understand, pursuing goals that aren't truly yours, and calling it freedom. Every morning, millions of men wake up and immediately check their phones. Why? Because something inside them is seeking stimulation, validation, distraction from the uncomfortable reality of being alone with their own thoughts. This isn't a choice, it's a compulsion. And that compulsion is just the beginning of a day filled with unconscious behaviors that masquerade as conscious decision. You eat when you're not hungry because something inside you craves comfort. You scroll through social media when you should be working because something inside you craves novelty. You pursue women not because you genuinely desire connection, but because something inside you craves validation of your worth as a man. You compete with other men not because you want to achieve excellence, but because something inside you craves the feeling of superiority. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. We think we're making rational decisions, but we're actually being puppeted by biological imperatives that care nothing about our happiness, our growth, or our authentic desire. We're mental slaves who've convinced ourselves we're free. Here's the first warning. Man is driven by the will to live, which manifests most powerfully in sexual desire. This is not love, but nature's trick to perpetuate itself. Think about the last time you felt genuinely attracted to someone. In that moment, your entire mental landscape shifted, didn't it? Your priorities rearranged themselves. Your ability to think clearly about anything else diminished. Your sense of what mattered in life suddenly revolved around one person, one possibility, one fantasy of fulfillment. Schopenhauer would tell you that in that moment, you weren't experiencing love, you were experiencing biological programming. Your genes were manipulating your consciousness to pursue reproduction, and they were so skillful at this manipulation that you interpreted it as the most meaningful experience of your life. This isn't cynicism, this is recognition, and recognition is the first step toward freedom. Modern men live in a world designed to exploit this programming. Every advertisement, every movie, every song conditions you to believe that sexual conquest equals masculine success, that your worth as a man is measured by your ability to attract women, to dominate other men, to accumulate the symbols of reproductive fitness. But here's what nobody tells you. The more you allow this programming to run your life, the weaker your mind becomes. Every time you make a decision based on what will make you more sexually attractive, rather than what will make you more genuinely excellent, you're training your brain to be a slave to impulses rather than a master of choices. Modern pain. You feel this in the crushing disappointment that follows sexual conquest. You thought getting her would change everything, but you feel exactly the same the next morning. You feel it in the way your mind becomes scattered and unfocused when you're pursuing someone. You feel it in the decisions you make that you know are beneath your potential, but you can't seem to stop yourself from making them. Application. Starting today, before you make any significant decision, ask yourself this question. Am I choosing this because it serves my authentic growth, or because it serves my biological program? Learn to pause in the moment when desire arises and recognize it for what it is. Not a command that must be obeyed, but information that can be observed. Create a morning practice where you spend 5 minutes in complete stillness, not trying to suppress thoughts or desire, but simply observing them as they arise and pass away. This builds the mental muscle of awareness that allows you to see your programming without being controlled. Pillar 2, the satisfaction delusion. The second warning cuts even deeper. The satisfaction of desire brings not happiness, but merely the temporary cessation of suffering. Every man knows this truth in his bones, but most spend their entire lives running from it. You get the promotion you've been chasing for months, and for exactly 48 hours, you feel successful. Then the satisfaction fades, and you're already looking toward the next achievement. You sleep with the woman you've been fantasizing about, and for exactly one night, you feel powerful. Then the emptiness returns, and you're already scanning for the next conquest. Schopenhauer understood what modern psychology has confirmed. Human beings are not designed for lasting satisfaction. We're designed for perpetual striving, because perpetual striving kept our ancestors alive. But in the modern world, this design feature has become a bug that traps us in cycles of endless hunger. Think about your own life. How many times have you achieved something you thought would make you happy, only to discover that the happiness lasted about as long as a good meal? How many times have you satisfied a desire, only to find that satisfaction immediately replaced by a new desire? This isn't a flaw in your character, this is the human condition, but recognizing it as such is what separates men who spend their lives chasing mirages from men who build something real. The most dangerous part of this cycle isn't the temporary disappointment when satisfaction fades. The most dangerous part is how it trains your mind to constantly look outside itself for fulfillment. You become addicted to the pursuit rather than finding peace in the present moment. Your ability to be content with what you have atrophies like an unused muscle. Modern pain. You feel this in the exhaustion that comes from always needing the next thing. This pain manifests as what modern men call the grind, this relentless pursuit of more that masquerades as ambition, but is actually a form of psychological slavery. You can't rest, because resting means facing the uncomfortable truth that you're not actually moving toward lasting fulfillment. You're just running on a treadmill that goes nowhere. Application. Institute what I call satisfaction audits in your life. The next level of success, the next relationship, the next experience that will finally make you feel complete. You feel it in the way nothing ever seems to be enough. Not your salary, not your achievements, not your relationships. You feel it in the restless anxiety that follows you everywhere, whispering that you're missing out on something better. At the end of each week, write down 3 things you achieved or acquired. Then honestly assess How long did the satisfaction from each achievement last? What did you immediately start wanting next? This isn't about becoming pessimistic. It's about developing realistic expectations that allow you to enjoy achievements without being enslaved by them. When you understand that no external accomplishment will provide lasting fulfillment, you stop looking for fulfillment in accomplishments and start building the internal foundation of contentment that makes achievements enjoyable rather than necessary. Practice the enough meditation. Each morning, spend 2 minutes acknowledging everything you already have that you once desperately wanted. Your current job, your current living situation, your current relationships. Notice how these things that once represented the height of desire have become baseline normal. This trains your mind to recognize the futility of seeking lasting happiness through acquisition. Pillar 3, the love illusion. The third warning will shake you to your core. What we call love is actually the unconscious will of the species expressing itself through individuals. Every romantic movie, every love song, every piece of cultural program tells you that romantic love is the highest human experience, that finding the one will complete, fulfill you, give your life ultimate meaning. Schopenhauer saw through this illusion with ruthless clarity. What you experience as the overwhelming, life-changing power of romantic love is actually your genes manipulating your consciousness to pursue reproductive success. The woman who makes your heart race, who occupies your thoughts, who seems to embody everything you've ever wanted. She triggers these feelings not because she's uniquely compatible with your soul, but because she displays markers of reproductive fitness that your unconscious mind recognizes as valuable. This doesn't mean love isn't real. It means what we call love is often something else entirely. It's biological programming dressed up in romantic language, evolutionary drives disguised as spiritual connection. Think about how romantic attraction actually works. You see someone across a room and feel instant chemistry. What are you actually responding to? Physical symmetry, markers of health, signals of fertility or status. Your conscious mind creates elaborate stories about compatibility and destiny, but your unconscious mind is running calculations about genetic combination and reproductive potential. Schopenhauer realized that when you understand this mechanism, you gain the power to choose consciously rather than being chosen by unconscious forces. You can appreciate beauty without being enslaved by it. You can enjoy attraction without being controlled by it. You can build relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than biological manipulation. Modern pain. You feel this in the devastating confusion that follows the end of relationships you thought were meant to be. You feel it in the way your judgment becomes clouded when you're attracted to someone, leading you to ignore obvious red flags or compromise your values. You feel it in the desperate need for validation that drives you to pursue people who are clearly wrong for. Most painfully, you feel it in the way romantic obsession hijacks your entire life. Your career suffers because you can't focus on anything except her. Your friendships deteriorate because you have no emotional energy for anyone else. Your personal growth stagnates because all your mental resources are devoted to winning and keeping one person's attention. This is what Schopenhauer called the focus of all willing, when sexual desire becomes so overwhelming that it consumes your entire capacity for rational thought and purposeful action. Application. Develop the practice of attraction analysis. When you feel strongly attracted to someone, instead of immediately pursuing or suppressing the feeling, pause and examine it. What specific traits triggered the attraction? What stories is your mind creating about this person based on minimal information? What biological drives might be influencing your perception? This isn't about becoming cold or calculated. It's about developing the awareness that allows you to distinguish between genuine compatibility and evolutionary programming. When you can see attraction clearly, you can choose whether to act on it based on your actual values and goals, rather than being compelled by unconscious drives. Create a relationship vision that defines what you actually want in a partnership based on your conscious values rather than your unconscious impulses. What kind of person would genuinely support your growth? What kind of relationship would actually enhance your life rather than dominating it? Use this vision as a filter that helps you make relationship decisions from wisdom rather than desire. Pillar 4, the cognitive hijacking. The fourth warning reveals the most insidious aspect of desire's power. A man dominated by sexual desire loses the ability to think clearly about anything else. This isn't metaphorical, this is neurological reality. When sexual desire reaches a certain intensity, it literally hijacks your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, long-term planning, and impulse control. The parts of your brain associated with survival and reproduction take over, and suddenly you're making choices that your rational mind would never approve of. Every man has experienced this hijacking, but most don't recognize it for what it is. You meet someone you're attracted to, and suddenly you're texting them. Instead of working on important projects, you're checking their social media. Instead of reading books that would improve your mind, you're planning your day around the possibility of seeing them instead of pursuing your actual goals. Schopenhauer observed this phenomenon in his own time, but modern neuroscience has confirmed exactly how it works. Sexual desire triggers the release of dopamine, norepinephrine, and phenylethylamine, chemicals that create a neurological state almost identical to addiction. Your brain becomes focused on seeking the next hit of romantic or sexual stimulation, and everything else becomes secondary. This is why intelligent, successful men make stupid decisions when they're infatuated. This is why disciplined men lose all discipline when they're pursuing someone. This is why men who are normally focused and purposeful become scattered and reactive when sexual desire takes over. The most dangerous part isn't the temporary loss of judgment. It's the way this pattern programs your brain to associate excitement with external validation rather than internal achievement. You become addicted to the dopamine hit of romantic pursuit, and the slower, steadier rewards of personal growth start to feel boring by comparison. Modern pain. You feel this in the projects you abandoned because a relationship became more interesting. You feel it in the way your productivity plummets when you're romantically obsessed. You feel it in the decisions you made while infatuated that you have to clean up for months after. You feel it in the way your entire life can be derailed by one person's attention or lack thereof. Your mood becomes dependent on whether she texts you back. Your self-worth becomes tied to whether she wants to see you. Your mental energy gets consumed by analyzing every interaction for signs of interest or rejection. This cognitive hijacking explains why so many men struggle with consistency in their personal development. They make progress for weeks or months, then meet someone attractive and immediately abandon all their routines, goals, and standards. The part of their brain that was driving disciplined behavior gets overridden by the part that's focused on reproductive success. Application. Learn to recognize the early signs of cognitive hijack before it reaches critical mass. These include constantly checking your phone for messages, difficulty concentrating on work or personal projects, analyzing conversations for hidden meanings, and making decisions based on impressing someone rather than improving yourself. When you notice these signs, implement what I call cognitive circuit breakers, specific practices that help restore your brain's executive function. Take a 24-hour communication break where you don't text, call, or check social media related to the person you're obsessed with. Use this time to reconnect with your actual priorities and goals. Develop a decision filter that you apply to all choices when you're romantically interested in someone. Would I make this same decision if this person didn't exist? If the answer is no, pause and consider whether you're being driven by authentic desire or cognitive hijacking. Create obsession antidotes, activities that are so engaging they require your full attention and naturally pull you out of romantic preoccupation. This might be intense physical exercise, complex intellectual challenges, or creative projects that demand focus. Pillar 5, the wisdom destroyer. The fifth warning exposes how desire doesn't just affect your thinking, it affects your very identity. Sexual passion makes the wisest men act like fools. Schopenhauer wasn't making a moral judgment here. He was making an empirical observation. He watched brilliant men of genuine accomplishment and wisdom, become completely irrational when sexual desire took hold. Men who could navigate complex business deals with perfect judgment would make obviously destructive choices in their romantic lives. Men who could see through every form of manipulation would become putty in the hands of attractive women. This happens because sexual desire doesn't just distract you from wisdom, it actively reverses the normal hierarchy of your mental faculties. Your emotional brain takes command, and your rational brain becomes its servant, creating elaborate justifications for whatever your emotions want to do. You've seen this in your own life and in the lives of men around you. The successful businessman who throws away his marriage for a younger woman who's obviously using him. The respected leader who compromises his integrity for sexual conquest. The disciplined athlete who destroys his training regimen because he's infatuated with someone who doesn't share his values. What makes this particularly dangerous is that the wisest men often fall hardest because they're not accustomed to having their judgment compromised. They've built their entire identity around being rational, disciplined, and in control. When sexual desire hijacks their decision-making, they're completely unprepared for the experience of acting against their own better judgment. Modern pain. You feel this in the shame that follows making choices you knew were wrong while you were making them. You feel it in the way you can give perfect advice to other men about relationships while being completely blind to the same patterns in your own life. You feel it in the humiliation of watching yourself act like a different person when you're under the influence of romantic obsession. This pain is amplified by the fact that society tells you that being driven by passion is somehow admirable, that making sacrificial choices for love proves your humanity. But you know the truth. There's nothing noble about compromising your values for temporary emotional gratification. There's nothing admirable about allowing your wisdom to be overridden by biological program. The men who suffer most from this are the ones who pride themselves on being rational and disciplined in other areas of life. When they find themselves making emotional decisions that contradict everything they believe about success and excellence, they experience a crisis of identity that can take years to resolve. Application. Develop what I call wisdom preservation protocols for times when sexual desire is running high. Before making any significant decision while romantically interested in someone, run it through a 3-step filter. First, the time test. How will I feel about this decision in 6 months if this relationship doesn't work out? Second, the friend test. What would I tell my best friend if he was considering making this same choice? Third, the values test. Does this decision align with my core principles and long-term goal? Create a wisdom council, a group of 3 to 5 men whose judgment you respect and who aren't afraid to tell you uncomfortable truths. When you're romantically involved with someone, schedule regular check-ins with these men to get outside perspective on your decisions and behavior. Institute a major decision moratorium when you're in the early stages of romantic attraction. For the first 90 days of any new romantic interest, don't make any significant changes to your life, career, or relationships. This gives your brain time to adjust to the neurochemical changes and prevents you from making irreversible choices while your judgment is compromised. Pillar 6. The discipline destroyer. The 6th warning strikes at the heart of masculine development. The man who has not learned to control his desires will never control anything else. This is perhaps Schopenhauer's most practical insight for modern men. Discipline isn't just about willpower or motivation, it's about understanding the hierarchy of control. If you can't control your sexual desires, you can't control your financial desires, your food desires, your entertainment desires, or any other impulse that demands immediate gratification. Sexual desire is like the master key to your entire impulse control system. When you learn to observe sexual desire without being compelled by it, you develop the mental muscle that allows you to observe all desires without being enslaved by them. When you can't control sexual desire, every other form of discipline becomes exponentially more difficult. Think about the most disciplined men you know. I guarantee you they've learned to have a conscious relationship with their sexual energy rather than being its victim. They don't suppress it or pretend it doesn't exist. They channel it toward purposes that serve their long-term vision, rather than allowing it to scatter their focus and energy. This is why the most successful men throughout history have understood the importance of sexual discipline, not because they were prudes or because they thought sex was evil, but because they recognized that sexual energy is raw creative power that can either build empires or destroy them, depending on how it's directed. In the modern world, this principle has been completely inverted. Men are told that sexual indulgence equals freedom, that restraint equals repression, that discipline equals dysfunction. But Schopenhauer saw the truth. The man who can't say no to his desires is the most enslaved man of all. Modern pain. You feel this in the way sexual distraction undermines every other area of discipline in your life. When you're constantly thinking about sex, dating, or romantic conquest, you don't have the mental energy for serious pursuits. When you're organizing your day around sexual gratification, you can't build the consistent routines that create lasting success. You feel it in the way sexual anxiety affects your confidence in all areas. When your self-worth is tied to sexual validation, you become emotionally volatile and reactive. When you're constantly seeking sexual stimulation, you lose the ability to find satisfaction in subtler forms of achievement and growth. Most painfully, you feel it in the recognition that every area where you lack discipline can be traced back to your inability to control your sexual impulses, your procrastination, your inconsistency, your tendency to choose immediate pleasure over long-term benefit. These all stem from the same root, a mind that's been trained to obey desires rather than direct. Application. Begin with what I call desire recognition training. For 1 week, simply notice every time sexual desire arises without trying to act on it or suppress it. Notice how it affects your thoughts, your mood, your ability to focus. Notice how it creates urgency and anxiety. This awareness alone will begin to weaken its power over you. Implement sexual discipline practices that gradually increase your ability to choose conscious response over compulsive reaction. This might mean taking cold showers, practicing extended periods without sexual stimulation, or learning to appreciate beauty without needing to possess it. Use sexual energy as fuel for your actual goals, rather than allowing it to dissipate through constant gratification. When you feel sexual desire arising, channel that energy into physical exercise, creative project, or professional development. Learn to transmute sexual energy into productive energy. Pillar 7. The recognition principle. The seventh warning offers the path to liberation. Only by recognizing the will's deceptions can one begin to achieve true freedom. This is the moment of awakening that changes everything. When you can see your desires clearly, not judging them as good or bad, but understanding them as biological programs running in the background of your consciousness, they lose their power to control you unconsciously. Schopenhauer called this recognition the first step toward the negation of the will. In practical terms, it means you stop identifying with your desires and start observing them. You stop thinking, I want this, and start recognizing the wanting mechanism is activated. You stop thinking, I need this to be happy, and start seeing the happiness-seeking program is running. This recognition doesn't eliminate desire, it transforms your relationship with desire. Instead of being the victim of your impulses, you become the witness of your impulses. Instead of being driven by unconscious programs, you develop the capacity for conscious choice. The most powerful aspect of this recognition is that it reveals the gap between stimulus and response that most men never see. Between the arising of desire and the acting on desire, there's a moment of choice. Most men miss this moment completely because they're not aware it exists, but once you see it, you can never unsee it. Modern pain. The pain here is different. It's the pain of responsibility. When you recognize that your impulses are just programs running, you can no longer blame your choices on uncontrollable forces. When you see the gap between desire and action, you become responsible for every decision you make. This recognition can initially be uncomfortable because it strips away the comforting illusion that you're a victim of circumstances. You realize that most of your suffering comes not from external events, but from your unconscious reactions to internal impulses. You see how much of your life has been spent in automatic mode, driven by programs you never chose to install. But this discomfort is the growing pain of genuine freedom. Every moment of recognition increases your capacity for conscious choice. Every time you catch yourself being driven by unconscious impulses, you develop a little more space between yourself and those impulses. Application. Develop a desire observation practice. Several times throughout the day, pause and scan your internal landscape. What desires are present right now? What impulses are trying to drive your behavior? What programs are running in the background of your consciousness? Create recognition triggers, specific moments in your day when you automatically check in with your inner state. This might be every time you pick up your phone, every time you eat, every time you interact with an attractive person. Use these triggers to develop the habit of conscious awareness. Practice what I call impulse labeling. When you notice a desire arising, instead of immediately acting on it or pushing it away, simply label it. Sexual desire arising, validation seeking arising, anxiety arising. This simple act of labeling creates distance between you and the impulse and prevents it from hijacking your consciousness. Pillar 8. The aesthetic liberation. The eighth and final warning reveals the ultimate alternative to possession-based happiness. The aesthetic contemplation of beauty, not its possession, brings genuine peace. This is Schopenhauer's most sophisticated insight, and it offers a complete reframe of how you relate to everything you find attractive or desirable. Instead of needing to possess beauty, success, or other people to feel fulfilled, you learn to appreciate them with what he called disinterested contemplation. When you see a beautiful woman, instead of immediately calculating how to possess her attention or affection, you can simply appreciate the beauty itself. When you see someone living a lifestyle you admire, instead of becoming consumed with envy or desperation to have what they have, you can appreciate the excellence they represent. When you encounter any form of beauty or success, you can enjoy it fully without needing to own it. This might sound like a consolation, like you're settling for less because you can't have what you really want. But Schopenhauer discovered something remarkable. Aesthetic appreciation actually provides more lasting satisfaction than possession ever could. When you possess something beautiful, you immediately start worrying about losing. When you achieve something you've been chasing, you immediately start looking for the next achievement. But when you appreciate beauty without needing to possess it, you can enjoy it without anxiety, without diminishing returns, without the inevitable disappointment that follows acquisition. Modern pain. You feel this in the exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to acquire and maintain possession, relationships, and experiences that you think will make you happy. You feel it in the anxiety that follows getting what you want, because now you have to worry about keeping. You feel it in the way possession never feels as good as anticipation. The modern man lives in a state of constant acquisition anxiety. He's either frustrated because he doesn't have what he wants, or anxious because he's afraid of losing what he has. He never experiences the peace that comes from being able to appreciate beauty without needing to control it. This anxiety extends beyond material possessions to relationships, experiences, and even personal achievements. You can't enjoy your current relationship because you're worried about whether it will last. You can't enjoy your current success because you're worried about whether you can maintain it. You can't enjoy the present moment because you're constantly focused on acquiring the next moment. Application, practice, possession-free appreciation in small ways throughout your day. When you see something beautiful, a sunset, a piece of art, an attractive person, consciously practice enjoying it without immediately thinking about how to possess, photograph, or acquire it. Develop appreciation rituals that train your mind to find satisfaction in observation rather than acquisition. This might mean taking daily walks where you practice noticing beauty in your environment without the need to capture or own it. It might mean visiting art museums with the specific intention of appreciating without purchasing. Apply this principle to your relationship with people. Instead of interacting with others primarily as means to get something you want, validation, affection, services, practice appreciating them for what they are. This doesn't mean becoming passive or unambitious. It means learning to enjoy the process of interaction without being attached to specific outcomes. Now that you understand the 8 warnings, the question becomes, how do you translate this philosophical understanding into practical mental strength that transforms your daily experience? The journey from mental slavery to mental sovereignty doesn't happen overnight, but it can begin immediately. Every moment you catch yourself being driven by unconscious impulses is a moment you reclaim your power. Every time you choose conscious response over automatic reaction, you strengthen the mental muscle that will eventually make you unbreakable. The first phase is recognition. For the next 30 days, your only job is to notice when these patterns are operating in your life. You're not trying to change anything yet, you're just developing the awareness that makes change possible. When you feel sexual desire hijacking your focus, notice it. When you feel the compulsion to possess rather than appreciate, notice it. When you feel your wisdom being overridden by emotional impulses, notice it. This recognition phase is crucial because most men try to change behaviors they haven't learned to see clearly. They try to develop discipline without understanding what's undermining their discipline. They try to make better choices without recognizing the unconscious programs that are driving their choices. The second phase is intervention. Once you can consistently recognize these patterns, you develop the ability to interrupt them. This doesn't mean suppressing desires or pretending they don't exist. It means creating space between the arising of impulse and the acting on impulse. In that space, conscious choice becomes possible. Develop what I call intervention protocols for each of the 8 warnings. When you notice sexual desire trying to hijack your focus, you have a specific practice for redirecting that energy toward productive purposes. When you notice the compulsion to possess something beautiful, you have a specific practice for shifting into appreciation mode. When you notice your wisdom being overridden by emotion, you have a specific practice for restoring rational perspective. The third phase is integration. This is where Schopenhauer's warnings become part of your operating system rather than concepts you have to consciously apply. Your mind naturally recognizes when unconscious programs are trying to run, and it automatically engages conscious awareness instead. In this phase, you don't have to fight your desires because you understand them so clearly that they can't deceive. You don't have to suppress your impulses because you've learned to channel them toward purposes that serve your authentic growth. You don't have to avoid beautiful things because you've learned to appreciate them without being enslaved by it. The daily practice, building mental sovereignty. Mental sovereignty isn't built through grand gestures or dramatic life changes. It's built through small, consistent practices that gradually rewire your relationship with your own mind. Here's the daily practice that embeds Schopenhauer's warnings into your nervous system. Morning recognition ritual. Spend the first 5 minutes of each day in complete stillness, observing whatever desires, anxieties, or impulses are present without trying to change them. This trains your capacity for disinterested observation and sets the tone for conscious awareness throughout the day. Evening integration review. Spend the last 5 minutes of each day reviewing moments when you were driven by unconscious impulses versus moments when you made conscious choices. This isn't about judgment or criticism. It's about pattern recognition that increases your awareness over time. Desire check-ins. 3 times throughout the day, pause and ask yourself, what do I want right now? And why do I want it? This develops the habit of examining your motivations rather than automatically acting on your impulses. Beauty appreciation. Practice. Once per day, consciously practice appreciating something beautiful without any impulse to possess photograph, or acquire it. This trains your mind to find satisfaction in observation rather than acquisition. Wisdom, preservation. Pause. Before making any significant decision, especially when you're emotionally activated, pause and ask, am I making this choice from wisdom or from impulse? This prevents the most damaging decisions that come from emotional hijack. The transformation, the man who masters his will. After 6 months of consistent practice with these principles, you'll notice fundamental changes in how you experience life. These aren't superficial behavior modifications. These are shifts in your basic operating system that affect everything you think, feel, and do. Your relationship with desire transforms complete. Instead of being driven by wants you don't understand, you develop the capacity to choose which desires to engage with and which to let pass. You still feel attraction, ambition, and appetite, but these feelings inform your choices rather than controlling them. Your decision-making clarity increases exponentially because you're no longer operating from unconscious programming. You can see situations objectively and choose responses that serve your long-term vision rather than your immediate impulses. The anxiety and confusion that comes from being pulled in multiple directions by competing desires fades into calm certainty about your priorities. Your emotional stability becomes unshakable, not because you don't feel emotions, but because emotions can no longer hijack your rational mind. You can experience anger without acting destructive, fear without being paralyzed, and desire without being enslaved. Most important, you develop what Schopenhauer called philosophical peace, a deep contentment that doesn't depend on external circumstances. You're no longer searching for the next thing that will make you happy because you've learned to find fulfillment in the conscious direction of your own mental energy. This transformation affects every relationship in your life. Women are drawn to you because they sense that you're not needy for their validation, but they also sense that you're capable of genuine appreciation. Men respect you because they recognize that you can't be manipulated by the usual tactics that work on unconscious mind. Your professional relationships improve because you're making decisions based on genuine value rather than ego or impulse. Knowledge without application is just sophisticated entertainment. The true test of whether you understand these warnings isn't whether you can explain them to someone else. It's whether you can apply them when your emotions are running high and your unconscious mind is trying to take control. Here's your 7-day challenge to prove Schopenhauer's warnings in your own life. Day 1. Practice the first warning by observing sexual desire without immediately acting on it. Notice how it tries to convince you that satisfaction will bring lasting happiness. Notice how it creates urgency and anxiety when not immediately gratified. Day 2. Test the second warning by achieving something you've been wanting and observing how quickly the satisfaction fades. Notice how your mind immediately starts looking for the next thing to pursue. Day 3. Apply the third warning by analyzing a time when you thought you were in love and recognizing the biological programming that was actually driving your feelings. Day 4. Experiment with the fourth warning by observing how attraction or infatuation affects your ability to focus on other important areas of your life. Day 5. Examine the fifth warning by identifying a time when sexual desire led you to make a decision that contradicted your better judgment. Day 6. Practice the sixth warning by using sexual discipline as training for other forms of discipline in your life. Day 7. Implement the eighth warning by practicing aesthetic appreciation without possession throughout the entire day. Document your observations each day. Write down what you notice about how these patterns operate in your own psychology. Pay attention to the resistance you feel to some of these practices. That resistance is usually a sign that you've touched on something important. The man who truly integrates Schopenhauer's 8 warnings doesn't become emotionless or inhuman. He becomes more human than most men ever achieve. He experiences the full range of human emotion and desire, but he experiences it consciously rather than being unconsciously controlled by it. This is what it means to be mentally unbreakable. Not that you never feel pain, but that pain can never break your essential center. Not that you never feel desire, but that desire can never compromise your integrity. Not that you never face challenges, but that challenges can never shake your fundamental sense of who you are. You become like water, fluid enough to adapt to any situation, but maintaining your essential nature regardless of what container you find yourself in. Pressure can shape your response, but it cannot change your core identity. Obstacles can redirect your path, but they cannot divert you from your ultimate destination. The men around you will sense this unbreakable quality, even if they can't articulate what they're sensing. They'll notice that you can't be manipulated through appeals to ego or desire. They'll see that you remain calm in situations that would agitate most men. They'll recognize that you're operating from a different level of consciousness, than the majority of men who are still driven by unconscious program. Women will be drawn to this unbreakable quality because it represents true masculine strength, not the brittle toughness that breaks under pressure, but the flexible strength that bends without breaking. They'll sense that you're not looking to them for completion or validation, but that you're capable of genuine appreciation and connection. Most importantly, you'll develop an unshakable sense of your own identity that doesn't depend on external validation or achievement. You'll know who you are independent of what you accomplish, who you're with, or what you possess. This inner certainty becomes the foundation for everything else you build in your life. As we reach the end of this journey through Schopenhauer's warnings, remember that understanding is only the beginning. These insights must be lived, practiced, and embodied to transform from intellectual concepts into real mental strength. The 8 warnings you've learned today represent over 150 years of philosophical insight into the human condition. They've been tested by countless men who found them to be accurate maps of their own inner territory. But maps are only useful if you follow them, and these warnings are only powerful if you apply them. Every morning when you wake up, you have a choice. You can live this day driven by unconscious forces you don't understand, or you can live it as a conscious architect of your own experience. You can spend today being manipulated by desires that promise satisfaction but deliver emptiness, or you can spend it building the mental strength that creates genuine fulfillment. The world will continue to bombard you with messages designed to keep you enslaved to unconscious impulses. Every advertisement, every entertainment medium, every cultural message will try to convince you that happiness comes from external acquisition rather than internal mastery. Your job is to remember what you've learned here and to practice it consistently, regardless of what the world around you is doing. Schopenhauer left us with this final insight. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. This doesn't mean becoming isolated or antisocial. It means developing the capacity to be complete within yourself, so that all your relationships and achievements become expressions of your fullness, rather than attempts to fill your emptiness. The journey from mental slavery to mental sovereignty is the most important work any man can undertake. It determines not just how successful you become, but how much you're able to enjoy your success. It determines not just who you attract into your life, but the quality of connection you're able to create. It determines not just what you achieve, but who you become in the process of achieving it. Take Schopenhauer's final words as your command. The world is my representation. Your external reality is a reflection of your internal state. Change your internal state through the conscious application of these 8 warnings, and your entire world will transform around you. The choice is yours. The power has always been yours. The question is, what will you do with it?